So if you're in here today to learn about how to make an Angular front end for your API, this is the right room. I want to kind of take a second and really think, what are we all doing here? Like, just really deeply think about this. I'm just kidding. I just want to talk about what we're doing here today. So today we're going to talk about GraphQL mostly, and about a project that I'm in the process of building. So we're going through the process of creating this project, like how do I even do this? So we'll talk about building the back end, and mostly working with Node and Express, MongoDB, and GraphQL. Then we'll take a look at the front end, and we will use Angular, the CLI, we'll use Kendo UI component library, and we'll look at Apollo, which is Apollo for Angular, for GraphQL. And along the way, we will also try to have a little bit of fun. So who is this person making you watch hot dogs dance across the screen? That is me. So my name is Tara Manicsic, and I am a developer advocate for Progress. I think there have been a few developer advocates on the stage for this conference. And we are all extremely excited to be here. I have never been to Helsinki before, so I was super stoked to come out here. I met Maxim at ngConf last year and was really amazed by all the things that he's been putting together. So thank you all very much for having me. I am also a new Google developer expert working with the web technologies team. I do a lot of talks on the open web, PWAs, and everything that surrounds it. As we said, I founded and directed both the Cincinnati Women Who Code chapter and the Node School chapter in Cincinnati. So if you couldn't guess, that means that I live in Cincinnati, Ohio. And you can find me on Twitter at tzmanix. I do try to share a lot of the things that I'm writing, the projects that I'm building, but really the most important thing that you can find on my Twitter feed is this weirdo right here. This is Tosh Magosh. This is my weird little dog, and she is amazing. So if anything to follow me on Twitter, that is one of the most fun. So I want to tell you about how I got to this point of thinking about building this project. Like, what is my origin story of the process of why I wanted to do this? I actually started out as a Node developer. I was working for a platform as a service, and I was mostly working with Node, with Mongo, with Go, and I loved it. I really loved doing all the back-end stuff, but I did so much work in the community. The company I was working for said, you should go into our developer relations team, and I had no idea what that was. But they were working with Angular, and I had done a little bit of Backbone, a little bit of React, and so I was like, I'll give this a try. So I was doing Angular for a while, and I was like, I'm really missing Node. And I was trying to find any excuse to work with Node again. And I found myself at a Women Tech Makers Lead Summit. And I have to be totally honest, we took so many pictures, and I chose this one because I thought I looked swole AF. So I was like, I'm going to brag on my biceps for this one. But at this conference, we realized that is anybody here part of a Google developer group? No? So they have all of these groups across the world that are dedicated to Google technologies and people in the Google community. So this was one of their meetings, and they brought on some of the Google developer experts that could be available to speak at the Google developer groups and talk about how we could build the bridge between Google developer experts and Google developer groups. So it was people who are really adamant about the technologies that are bringing it and speaking about it to groups around the world, around the country. And I was like, this is a perfect opportunity for an API. So I said I would take on creating an API that would grab all the information about GDEs, where they were actually based, what their specialties were, if they wanted to talk, things like that. And I have to say, I consider myself a pretty smart person, and I really like taking on new challenges, and I've learned the really important skills of how to be a good developer. Yet, I realized going into this project, it was quite difficult, and it was because of one of this main thing. There's actually not too much information out there to guide you through the whole process back to front of creating an API and creating the front for your API. And I'm sure there are classes out there, but as far as you know, I tend to try to read documentation and read forums and such. And there wasn't too much cohesive, structured, standardized ways to do this. So I will take you through my journey, and first we will start behind the scenes. We are going to talk about basically first the back end, how I set up the different database, how I talk to the database with GraphQL and the Express server. And the first thing that I got into was creating my MongoDB. And I chose Mongo because I had always worked with it, and I didn't want to jump into anything new just yet. And I was very lucky to find MLab. Has anybody heard of MLab? Nice. This was the first time that I've actually had worked through a GUI for databases. I worked on Docker a lot, so I was in containers a lot, so I was always in the terminal. And it was funny just like going around and clicking buttons to make things inside of a database, which I'm sure so many people are used to, but I was like, this is funny. But anyway, you can go to MLab, really, really easily create your Mongo instance, your Mongo database, and they have this place that you can just hit create document. And that's what I was doing right there. The button's up top, and it's in one of your tabs up top. And it creates your ID for you, and it puts everything in there exactly where you need it to be. So I thought that was extremely convenient. And then the next thing I did was I actually didn't do too much of a skeleton to create my GraphQL server with Express. I kind of just dove in, because why not, right? And I made just two JavaScript files. First, the index.js to work with Babel. And to be completely honest, I'm not the biggest fan of Babel. I kind of want to go in the direction where we're trying to get rid of transpilers and go more standardized. Because the way the ECMAScript is working right now, they're going so quickly with the releases that it's easier for browsers to keep up. Nonetheless, again, we're trying to do an easy journey, right? So the index.js just had the Babel configs inside of there. And then this is the big chunk of it. This is the start.js file. Now, I basically brought in what we needed from MongoDB to talk to Mongo, like Mongo client, to connect to the client database. And that's what you see up top. And then we have GraphQL Express and Graphical Express. Graphical is the way that you can interact with your GraphQL inside of the browser. And it's really nice, it's really convenient. I'll show you what that looks like in a little bit. And then we went ahead and did grab some tools from GraphQL Tools to make some schemas. Because the biggest thing with GraphQL is, has anybody here worked with GraphQL before? Nice, Simona has. So the biggest thing about GraphQL is it lets you be very specific about how you are grabbing your information. So it lets you query things specifically how you want to do it, so you're writing queries instead of writing code to manipulate what you're getting and giving. So down here, oh good, I did do that. Let me go back. So you see that we're connecting down here into the client, but we had to do it inside of an async function because we have to wait for that connection to happen. So we did async await inside of there to do the await to wait for the connection of the client, and passed in our Mongo URL. And then I had the database that are the GDE API database. And then this is where we start to get into, oh, can you all see that? Yeah. Oh, good, thanks. Basically down here, oh, that's great, thank you. Better? Good. Is anybody ready for a nap? That would help too. So here we start to talk about our types. And so we have our GDE type, and basically we're just making the structure of what a GDE is going to have. So this is the very beginning of how we're going to structure it. So we're just getting the name, location, Twitter, and then I changed this as I go through, but I added events right here that will actually be an array later. And that's pretty straightforward. You're making a GDE type that describes this thing that you're trying to store and get back. The mutation is basically the changes that you're going to make. That's kind of like your CRUD movements and or your CRUD verbs. But here we're just going to do create GDE for now. And we basically just need to tell it what we're going to send it, and it's based off of the GDE type. Then we have the schema below it that has the queries passed through and the mutations. So all of that is all together. We can take a look at the resolvers. And this is basically, again, making the actions for understanding what the queries are, and again, what the mutations are. So how we're getting the information, how we're querying it, and how we're changing it, how we're mutating it. Which is a really funny thing to Google, by the way, because it's like, if you don't Google it correctly, you're like, mutations, and you're like, oh, I did not want to see that. So then you have your schema down there below, and with the type definitions and the resolvers that we just talked about right there. We are a little behind schedule already. So now this is when we start to talk with Express and say, this is the application we're going to do. Have many people worked with Express here? Okay, great, yeah. So it's your node framework talking about making your server, what to use, and your endpoints that you're going to do. The interesting thing to me was with your graphical, on that second or the third app.use, you have to actually send it the original GraphQL endpoint. If you send it the graphical, it makes this really amazing thing happen where all of your HTML is inside of the UI for your graphical interface. It's very interesting. Then we go ahead and send it the port and send a console message back letting us know, and then we have the catch from that above async. So one thing that I wanted to say is, like, going through this process, you always remember just how the struggle is real. So I was trying to work on this bug for a while, and finally I was like, worked through, and I realized I had just spelled return wrong. And it was like, there were a few things that were, in the way, but then to get this in my graphical, it was like, oh yeah, great, that's right. I do not know how to spell. And it always makes me wonder what everybody's like most misspelled word is. This is not, I have 18 of them, but this is one of them. So if you take a look, this is the graphical that we were talking about, that I was talking about, I am just one person, not we, earlier, where you can mess with your GraphQL and see what you're getting back, see what you can query, and what you can mutate, and what the response is going to be. So this, I just went for all the GDEs to see what I would get back. And these are some of my favorite people, so I put them in there. And this is when you're getting all the data back. So it actually populates it for you. When you do GDEs and inside of curly brackets, it will populate every parameter that they can give back to you. So then when you want to just put what you need, you can skim down that list and just add those, so you know that your query is only going to return the certain things you need. So you're only setting your query. You're not manipulating the data that you get back. This is one of the resources that I found most helpful, and this is graphql.org's learn/queries. And it's basically, you scroll through, and it's a whole list of all of the different mutations, like how you do mutations, how you do queries, and it gives you live examples in there. It's a really great list, and it's all on that one page, so I appreciated that a lot. Now, one thing that I wanted to do today is kind of give you a way to remember some of these things, kind of keep it in your head, but also kind of keep you awake. So I came up with these things called Viking Chant challenges. So this does, there are very few of them, I promise. I wrapped in NG Atlanta, and I think I did a little bit too many because some people got too excited. So I don't want to get you too excited. So The way this is going to work is it's kind of like, I thought about like rowing, like Vikings rowing. And so it's kind of a chant like that. And basically, there are underlined words that the last word is going to rhyme with. So when you see an ellipsis, oh, you came at a perfect time. You're going to have to yell really loudly, though. Are you ready? Awesome. So what's going to happen is I'm going to go through the chant, and the last word, it's up to you all to say together. And I'm pretty sure you will know what this word is. So is everybody ready? Oh. Nobody's even awake. Okay, here we go. Fetch data oh so well, doing just what you tell. Query and type, worth all the hype. So easy with... Yay! Good job, awesome. Was that really hard? I know you all are very, very smart. So I knew there may be another one. So I'll let you kind of get yourself hyped up for that. In the meantime, I will tell you that there are other ways to make your GraphQL servers. And I realized that the approach that I took may have been the more difficult approach. But as people say, if it doesn't kill you, you get to stay alive. So one of the really nice ones that I found was the Launchpad. It's the GraphQL, it's the Apollo Launchpad. And they give you kind of boilerplate to work with, and it kind of works like gists. And I can't recall any of the other, like Fiddler and everything, where you can mess around with it. I really liked the point that you can have secrets up here. And you can save it, you can fork it. It's a really nice tool. And personally, I just kept, when I tried it out, I would just copy all of it, put it in my terminal, so I could like Vim it out and put it up to a, Git repo. So it's a very, very handy tool. I would highly recommend checking it out. And also, when I hosted my server, I actually did it through Zeit. Does anybody know Zeit? Oh, nice. So they have this thing called now. And all you do, see up there, you go into your directory and you just type now. And I really like that because it reminds me of when people are like, you get a treat from somebody and they're like, what, they go to give it to you and they're like, what do you say? And there's always that brat's like, now. So that's what I feel like. So you go to zeit.co/now to check that out. And it is really, really quick, and it's nice, and I had no difficulties with it whatsoever. One thing to remember, though, is that so this is the open source software tier, the OSS tier. So all of your code, all of your logs are available for anybody. So I already took mine down and messed with what my URL is, because like any healthy relationship, I love you all, I just do not trust you. So next we want to look at the front side of this. And basically, the first two things, I'm pretty sure everybody's quite familiar with the Angular CLI, right? So I didn't want to, you just like raising your hand. So I didn't want to delve too much in it. So I just wanted to tell you that the main two things that I used was ng-new with the dash, with the service worker flag. And I really like this because it lets you get configurations a lot for your service workers. And this is like the first thing since, what was it? I think Angular Mobile or something that Jeff Cross and them worked on to really help you out from the CLI for your PWAs. And then I went ahead and generated a component for a GDE list. So starting out like that, we have these files that we're going to work with. And under here, it's just the regular components. I didn't want to go through all of what we're installing and all of that jazz. So I'm just going to show you a whole bunch of code files. Is that legible at all from this point? I'll share my slides and I'm just going to read every single line by line, okay? I'm just kidding. So basically we have the usual of the browser modules and your ng module, but I also have the Apollo modules in here. And this is where we're bringing in working with GraphQL. So it's just so easy, this was by far one of the easiest parts, was including GraphQL and Apollo inside of the Angular application. And I also snuck inside here some Kendo UI components, the button component and the inputs component. This is the company that I work for, disclaimer, but they make it really easy because Angular was the first framework that they decided to build components from the ground up. They've been building component libraries for like over 15 years, but they really had a lot of faith in Angular and really liked working with the framework, so they decided to make true, actual Angular components. So they're really easy to just import in like other modules. And then we also have, since we created that component for our GDE list, we have that component, and then we import all of those in. And since we did that -- service worker flag, you see down here that we have the service worker module that is working, and it's registering the service worker dependent on what environment we're in. Lower down inside of that file, we are adding our Apollo configurations. So this is where that link that we got from Zeit is going right inside of here. And again, it's just going inside of your constructor, you're passing through Apollo and your HTTP link, and then you're creating the link with that one from Zeit, and also adding a place to cache with in-memory cache. I was surprised how easy it was with that, so I appreciated that a lot. So now we're looking at the GDE list component. And this is basically the place that we are going to grab the information about GDEs and work with that, what we're getting back from the database by using GraphQL. So you see here that we're working with observables when we work with what we're getting back from Apollo. So we're passing through observables, and we're also working with some tools from GraphQL, like GQL and the Apollo Angular. We're pulling all of that in. And you see down under our export, inside of our class, the GDE list class, that's when we're assigning the GDE array as an observable. And then the query is where we structure. So you'll see a lot of repetition. So we understand like what the structure of this is going to look like. We just go over and over again like, yes, this is what it's going to be. Yes, this is what it's going to look like. But this is where you're able to basically configure exactly what you want and what you want to get back. And then we tie on value changes and pipe it to a map to get all the results into data. So then when we look at the HTML of it, when we look at the template, we can see that when we want to bring these in, we're basically just doing an ngFor, looping through, and like most ngFors, we have it piped to async, and we're just bringing those in to where we want them to live in our components. So that is basically the gist of how we're bringing in everything from GraphQL. And so basically, these are the next steps that the project is going to take. So this is like the skeleton of what the next steps are. And I'll be writing a whole blog post in a series on this. So this is like, video 0 that you get to see live. So this is what we're going to have, is this documentation basically for the GDE API, that we will build it up into documentation, but also have a way to make live changes using that API inside of the documentation to hopefully just give people a better understanding, because we have so many APIs out there, but we don't always have the best documentation to understand how to use those APIs. And if anybody's looked at just the web API list lately, it's an insane amount of APIs. So I feel like the more we try to experiment with our documentation, the more we can try to understand how we can get users to use APIs more easily, and also understand it much more clearly. So this is basically what we would have towards the end, is a documentation style of basically running through so you understand what actions you're taking, what response you're getting. But then below it, you would also have a place that you would be entering information like you would on a website. You would actually be using the API, send it through, and get the information back through. And so this one here, I just threw some very easy Kendo UI components. This is like the button and the, I believe I put there's like a way to make, it's like a constraint box so you can tell people what they want in there. So, to wake you up, I have another Viking chant challenge. Let's see if you can know what this word is. Is everybody ready? Kind of. Yeah. All right. To make our app look fly, so pleasing to the eye, with UXQ accessibility to, thanks to... I have one more that's coming up that I think everybody will get. So we'll go quickly through this. The future plans for what I'm going to be doing with the GDE API. One of my biggest things is doing a lot of refactoring because looking through it, even as I was going through all my code, you understand when you look at your code, you immediately want to change it. And I understand a lot of people think about code refactoring and immediately they're like, no, why would I do that? I slip in and it's a mess. But as you saw, the cat gets back out. We do get to a good place. I also want to definitely go more PWAE with it. Since we already set it up with the service workers, that would just take a matter of putting in an app manifest so that we have a more app-like feel. Because, as I was saying before, a lot of these GDEs are traveling a lot. A lot of the work they're going to be doing is on their mobile phone, probably, like Simona said yesterday, on an airplane. So we also want to try to add that offline data entry. And we'll do that with the service worker that we already kind of have in play because we use the service worker flag through the Angular CLI. I also want to do a lot more. So there's more information that we can utilize, talking about who is going to what events, where they can speak at different places, ways for everybody to contact people to see where they can speak, what information they can get, what workshops they can team up with, and also tie it into the GDG groups, that's redundant, to the Google developer groups to see how we can grow this community and give everybody more resources for you to learn more and experience more and meet more people. Speaking of meeting people, please come talk to me. So especially if you know what song this is in reference to. But I am always around, and I swear I am very nice. And we also have a booth over there with Ed and Jack. They are very, very nice as well. And we're also giving away headphones. So if you would like a pair of Bose headphones, there's a QR code here and at the booth. I will have my slides and such. I'll tweet them out from TZ Manix. But before I go, I have one more opportunity for you all to actually do this as a group together and shout as loud as you possibly can. So don't you all just want to scream very loudly? Wouldn't that be fun? And think about the acoustics in here. It would be pretty amazing. And you can all do it as a group, as a big Angular group together. And I think you will all get this. So does everybody really want to try this one last time? Maybe? All right, here we go. A conference to our likings. From near and far, we're hikings. It's so cold out, but we still shout, hooray for NG. Yay! Good job. Thank you all very much. Have a good day.